Hello, and welcome to this lesson on analyzing life cycle assessments. In today's lesson, we will first recognize the components of life cycle assessments, or LCAs, that can be easily quantified, such as water, resource usage, energy consumption, and waste production. We'll then move on to understand the complexities and challenges associated with quantifying the effects of pollutants in LCAs. Let's get started. When carrying out LCAs, we need to look at several factors that help us understand the environmental impact of a product throughout its entire life cycle, from production to disposal. Some of these factors are straightforward to measure, while others present a significant challenge. Firstly, let's examine the components of LCAs that are easily quantifiable. Firstly, water usage. At each stage of a product's life cycle, we can measure the volume of water consumed. For example, in agriculture, we can quantify the water used for irrigation. Similarly, in manufacturing, we can measure the water used for cooling, cleaning, or as a raw material itself. By keeping track of these volumes, we can calculate the total water footprint of the product. Next is resource usage. This involves assessing the quantity of raw materials used during production and manufacturing processes. For instance, in the production of a plastic bottle, we can quantify the amount of petroleum used. In a wooden chair, we can measure the amount of timber harvested. Since these raw material quantities can often be directly obtained from production records or supplier information, they are relatively easy to quantify. Another quantifiable component is energy sources. Energy consumption is crucial to understanding the environmental impact of a product. By examining electricity bills, fuel usage, or energy meters, we can determine the total energy footprint. For example, the energy required to transport goods can be measured in terms of fuel consumption during transportation. Next is waste production. Quantifying the amount of waste generated, including solid, liquid, and gaseous waste, is another aspect of an LCA that we can quantify. For example, the emissions from a power plant can be measured in terms of the amount of CO2 released. By monitoring waste outputs, we can calculate the total waste footprint of the product. Now, while these components are straightforward to measure, not every aspect of a life cycle assessment is as easily quantified. Let's look at some of the more challenging factors. Starting with pollutant effects. Allocating numerical values to the environmental and health impacts of pollutants is complex. This is because it involves assessing long-term and indirect effects, which can vary and be uncertain. For instance, determining the impact of chemical pollutants on ecosystems or human health often requires complex models and assumptions. The variability in how these pollutants interact with different environments makes it challenging to pinpoint accurate numerical values. Next is value judgments. LCAs often require making value judgments about the relative importance of various environmental impacts. For example, while we can directly quantify the water usage and greenhouse gas emissions associated with a product, deciding which of these factors has greater environmental impact can be subjective. These decisions can introduce bias and variability into the LCA results. Hence, while quantifying certain factors might be straightforward, interpreting the overall environmental impact can be nuanced and up to debate. Understanding both the easily quantifiable and the more challenging aspects of LCAs allows us to appreciate the complexities involved in assessing a product's environmental footprint. This knowledge helps chemists and environmental scientists develop more accurate and comprehensive assessments, aiding in better decision-making for sustainable practices. In today's lesson, we delved into life cycle assessments and their importance in evaluating the environmental impacts of products from production to disposal. We focused on components of LCAs that are easily quantifiable, such as water usage, resource usage, energy consumption, and waste production. We also discussed the complexities involved in assessing the effects of pollutants, highlighting the challenges posed by long-term and indirect impacts on ecosystems and human health. Additionally, we touched upon the subjective nature of value judgments in LCAs, which can introduce bias and variability. Watch the rest of the GCSE chemistry course at Sophos Education.